Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. I am not joined by Taylor Rockwell today, but I do have a guest. Today's guest is Tiago Estêvão, a Portuguese analyst, scout and writer who you really should be following on Twitter. Tiago does great analysis, offers great insights in his Twitter feed. You can also find him at whoscored.com, Tifo Football and many, many other places. I'll be talking to Tiago about the Portuguese national team. This is the start of our World Cup warm-up. We're going to try and talk to as many sort of journalists and writers and experts, preferably in their home country, about the national teams of the World Cup. We're not committing to all 32 because it may not be possible, but we're going to do our very best. So if you listen to today's show, you'll hear Tiago sort of explain Portugal's style, how they go about it and how the team matches up to Spain, Morocco and Iran, the three opponents at the World Cup. We'll talk about specific players. Obviously, we'll talk about Cristiano Ronaldo's role and some of the questions facing the coach Fernando Santos in the build-up to the World Cup as he gets ready to pick his final 23-man roster. We also talk about my team, Wolverhampton Wanderers, and Tiago offers some really good insights into the Portuguese influence at Wolves and lets us know how to pronounce Ruben Neves' name correctly. But that's enough previewing from me. Let's get to the conversation. So I am joined by Tiago Estêvão. Hello, Tiago. Welcome to the show. And my first question is, how's my pronunciation?
It was solid. Not many English speakers can do it well, so I just let it slide regardless of how it is.
Yeah.
I don't usually comment on it, but it was a solid 7 out of 10, I suppose.
Thank you. I will take 7 out of 10. Ronaldo's number, not so bad, right?
Yeah, I'm a kind soul today.
Well, thank you very much. You are also, here's how I know you, Tiago. I know you from Twitter. I follow you on Twitter and I read a lot of your analysis and your sort of opinions of players. My understanding is that I really enjoy your work. My understanding is that your job is you're a sort of analyst and scout on a freelance basis. And it seems to me that you do a bit like for editorial, as in you'll publish, you'll write stuff for publications, but also you do some work for professional teams as well. So I'm wondering could you before we talk Portuguese national team, could you sort of give our listeners and give me a brief overview of kind of exactly what it is you do?
Yeah, so I think you summed it up pretty nicely, actually. I could, if you want to do the podcast alone and just, so I do football analysis and / scouting, whatever you want to call it. And at the moment, I do mostly for editorial, just like you said. So I mostly write for websites or any sort of media that decides to pay me to speak about football, which is lovely. I've done some work for clubs, not much, unfortunately, because the clubs here aren't too kind to invest in analysis yet, or to invest much in analysis yet. But hopefully in the future that will kickstart a little bit more. But at the moment it's a little bit more focused in editorial work, and I tend to focus on football analysis. I try to mix up kind of tactical with statistical analysis or analytics, whatever you want to call it. I don't think one can necessarily live without the other per se. And I like to do scouting stuff, but beyond that, it's mostly what you see on Twitter. Try to get a couple of articles up whenever I can. And that's about it at the moment.
So I've seen your work on Who Scored. I've seen you working with Tifo Football, who I'm a big admirer of. I really like their content and I like how it looks as well.
It's a very, very fun medium.
It is, right? Yeah. I think it's like presenting quite detailed information, but in a fun way, which I think is a really good way to do it.
The visuals are pretty.
Yeah, very much so. And then can I also assume that you do some work for some Portuguese publications that I am unable to read without Google Translate?
Yes. From time to time, I do write for Portuguese publications, either mostly websites. And I do it at times. And I also have a Portuguese football podcast, or not necessarily focused in Portuguese football, just focused in football in general, but it is in Portuguese. So
yes. I saw this in your Twitter profile. Is it it's Lateral Lines or Linha Lateral? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the name. Yeah, I have. It's a very interesting podcast. It's working out really well here. Like I think we're building up a very decent following while being independent, which is lovely. And yeah, I do it with a colleague of mine, and we just are fortunate enough to have an audience that understands that we like to talk about football in general, and every episode we just kind of talk about whatever's on the table and whatever we feel like it, and that's great because here we often have a bit of an unfortunate focus on what's like beyond the game, there's a lot of focus on football without actual football talk, just refereeing and fan conflicts and things of the sort. So we're hoping to fill the market with a little bit. We're hoping to fill that void in the market a little bit, and it's working out just fine. I'm sorry that you can't listen to it, but it sure would be awkward to do it in English.
Yeah, you can't Google Translate a podcast just yet, right? But we can get you on here to ask you about the Portuguese national team as we sort of start to get geared up for the 2018 World Cup. I'm sort of
so
calling
exciting.
Yeah, right. I'm calling this like an early World Cup preview or a premature World Cup preview because the squads aren't named or anything like that. So I guess my first question is, obviously Portugal won Euro 2016, which I know was a massive deal, right?
It's wild. It's crazy. It still doesn't fit well. Like it still doesn't sit well. Both in the way that it happened and the fact that it happened.
So does that mean that going into the 2018 World Cup, people are even more excited and optimistic than ever?
I'm not sure they are necessarily. Like we won a trophy, and especially in such an unexpected way.
Yeah.
Like, no analyst, no person would really consider us as favourites, I don't think.
Oh no, we predicted from the very beginning that Adair would score the winner in the final. Yeah,
I know, right? Everyone did. The bookies had it so low it wasn't even worth betting. No, but yeah, so it was very unexpected scenario somewhat, and I don't think people are, if anything, I think people are more, like people are excited, of course, but people aren't necessarily putting pressure on the team, I don't think.
Okay.
Or from my experience, I think people are kind of taking it back, because especially not because we won and we're just like, okay, we won, whatever now. It's more of like, or at least this is my view on it, and I know a bunch more people with this view on it, which is like, we won it, and we won it in a very less than practical, quite luck-based way.
I see.
Per se, and like, I think we're all pretty aware that we have a talented national team, but it's not likely that we're going to be able to repeat the feat. So we're going to try to get as far as we can. We're obviously hopeful, and there's a bunch of talented players, but I'm not sure anyone is convinced that the same can happen again, and especially not approaching the games the way that we do somewhat. So yeah, I think we're all just kind of taking it a little bit laid back.
Can we get into that then? Because my memory from Euro 2016, and it's still the same coach in charge,
single memory. You have a single memory from Euro 2016.
No, my general memory of Euro 2016 is Fernando Santos in charge. He's still in charge. And I remember Portugal playing in what I would call a sort of 4-1-3-2 maybe, with William Carvalho as the defensive midfielder and Ronaldo and either Nani or Andre Silva up top. But I remember them being sort of not too aggressive in terms of attacking. I remember two, I'm going to say elderly centre-backs in Pepe and Bruno Alves.
Still going.
And the team sort of not being really too willing to open up because they didn't want to expose the centre-backs, and kind of just relying on making sure that eventually they got the ball forward to Ronaldo and something would happen. And I remember not too many games won within 90 minutes, right? It was a lot of sort of narrow wins, often in extra time, and draws in the group stage. So is that accurate? Is that accurate? And is anything different in 2018 compared to 2016?
Yeah, so we got very lucky in the group stage that we went through in third, which was the first time that third place teams could go through, right? And we went through in third without winning a single game because why not? And we just played quite poorly. And then after the first couple of matches, the manager made a few changes, and changes in the team. Like Andre Gomes was dropped, William Carvalho and Adrian Silva were brought into the 11. Then they stuck in until what was left of the tournament, and I don't think we won a single game within 90 minutes.
Right.
We won against Wales in the semi-finals.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, we didn't win a single game. We won them all in extra time or drew, which is quite impressive. Not necessarily in a great way, but like every team wanted, like, if you could pick your team to win the tournament a certain way, I think this is one of the most fun ways to do it. It's just not repeatable at all, you know? So, yeah, we definitely played in that 4-4-2 with kind of like 4 center mids almost.
Yeah.
1 defensive midfielder. We had Cristiano and Nani up top. Andrea Silva did not go to the tournament. He wasn't a part of the squad yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got the name wrong. I'm thinking of the striker who's now at Milan. Is it
Yeah, Andrea Silva. I don't think he was in the tournament yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
He was brought in. Yeah, no, it's fine. But it was mostly Nani, and now Nani has kind of been replaced by him during the qualifiers. And Andrea Silva and Ronaldo have actually established quite a solid partnership, and they've been doing super well. And
so
like, they
is that the big change then? The big change is instead of the Nani-Ronaldo partnership, it's Andre Silva-Ronaldo partnership?
I don't think the team plays particularly different despite that change.
Okay.
But like our 11 is going to be very similar. Up top, it's going to be Andre Silva partnering Ronaldo instead of Nani. And the back line is likely to have 1 different centre-back, but the rest of the back line and goalkeeper should be the same, which should still be Rui Patricio in goal. Cedric as a right back, even though we have so many good other great right backs now. Cedric is still probably going to be the first option. And then Pep is going to be one of the centre backs. Left back is going to be Rafael Guerreiro if he's fit. So that second centre back is one of the questions. And then in midfield is where arguably the biggest change happens from the Euro, which is bringing in Bernardo Silva, who was not able to play in the Euro because he was injured.
Aha.
And now he's obviously a starter. And I wouldn't say he's a key part of the team just because he hasn't been used as such, not because he's not talented enough. He obviously is, and he's coming off of an unbelievable season.
Yeah, so when I see Bernardo Silva with Manchester City, I often see him playing quite wide. So if Fernando Santos is doing this sort of 4 central midfielders type thing, does it still work with Bernardo Silva?
Yeah, well, the thing is, this is very weird. Like, I'm going to come off somewhat negative. Okay. But it's unfortunate as it is. But like the team is pretty prepared in theory to play against stronger teams, or like to play in like this type of World Cup tournament format in which you face normally teams of the same level or stronger teams, and you can kind of play in this more counter-attacking style that you were mentioning and just kind of sit back a little bit more. And our problem is against smaller teams where our 2 other, I'm not even going to call them center midfielders, they're way too wide even. Like, even if they're supposedly going to be João Mario on the left and Bernardo Silva on the right, they're usually even way too wide. Like, we have a lot of problems in build-up and in playing with the ball against teams that are quote-unquote inferior, per se. And that if anything, not bringing Bernardo to a more interior position that, like, he likes to start wide, right? But we're not taking advantage of the way that he can kind of disrupt the central corridor is unfortunate, and that's kind of where we struggled. It's a very cross-heavy system that has a lot of trouble like unraveling packed backlines that can deal with set crosses, you know.
So when you say a heavy cross-based system, this is when you're up against maybe a weaker opponent and you're trying to break them down. Do you have the fullbacks getting forward? Because I'm a big admirer of you pronounce it differently, but I'm going to go with Rafael Guerreiro. I'm a big admirer of his game. I think he offers a lot going forward.
Yeah, he was very important in the Euro. Yeah, he was very, very, very important in the Euro. I think he was probably one of our top 3 players at the Euro. Like, he was somewhat underrated. Like, because it was his first tournament with the team, but he's essential, and he can take set pieces really well. Technically, very, very good as well. But our problem is that this is the problem that we've seen in the latest friendlies, at least, is that like our fullbacks do go forward, but then they often somewhat collide with our quote-unquote wingers, and our positioning with the ball is very questionable, and that's what needs to really improve in these 2 months. 2 months, right?
Yeah.
In these 2 months before the World Cup, because I'm not. When I say, I was going to say I'm not particularly worried about playing Spain, and like that's because even if you lose, like it's Spain. Like, as much as Portugal has won the last tournament or the Euro, Spain has a different talent pool, right? So right. It's no shame to lose to Spain, and Portugal are arguably more comfortable against these types of teams that can have the ball and can let Portugal counterattack as they wish, even though Spain are really good at avoiding that regardless. But
is it good or bad that it's
matches.
Is it good or bad that it's the first game, Portugal v Spain?
I honestly don't know. I'm just worried about the other 2 matches, and I would be regardless of when we play Spain, because our qualifying campaign, almost unfortunately, offered us a group that really only had one worthy opponent, with all the respect, which was Switzerland.
I see.
And all the other teams were like, the team that got third was Hungary, I think. And Hungary are really quite poor. So in a group with like, I'm not even sure, 6, 8 teams, I'm not sure. Like Portugal kind of streamlined through, and the only team that they had to worry about was Switzerland, and we finished on the same amount of points. But we finished top because of goals scored, I think, or goal difference. And those goals came along against the Faroe Islands, came along against Hungary, and Switzerland won the same amount won those games as well. They just don't have the attacking power to just give 7 and 8 nils to those kinds of teams instead of giving 2 and 3 nil like they did. So it's a very awkward stage, because I feel like if we had the luck, or if we had the bad luck of facing more mid-tier teams, we probably would have been better prepared for the World Cup. But at the same time, we may not have been at the World Cup. So it's this mixed bag of situations that you have to deal with. And now I really don't know how Portugal are going to do facing Iran and Morocco. Especially Iran, which are, well, both teams are really, really good defensively. Morocco didn't concede a single goal in the latest stage of qualification, and Iran are incredibly well coached by a Portuguese manager.
So this is
the of our distance.
This is what makes you an analyst, Tiago, is most people would look at those 3 games and say, oh, we're worried about the Spain game, but we assume Iran and Morocco are the easy games. But everything you've just said makes perfect sense.
I don't think the matchup is ideal for us now. And I think, I don't know, it's if we go through, like, because the situation is, you have, I don't know if you watched, but our latest friendlies exposed that perfectly well, and especially our friendly against Egypt exposed the team that has a lot of trouble having the ball, and that has a lot of trouble creating. Yeah, you didn't miss much, like, but it's unfortunate, and of course I'm going to root for my team, and of course I'm hopeful.
Yeah,
because ultimately, I'm sure like the psychological power per se and the confidence that our manager has pulled us through in the Euros as well, and he has a lot of merit in that. And that's one of the key things as a national team manager, right? Like as having a lot more of like human understanding and who to pick up for your team and how to establish a group and group confidence and all of those things, more so than necessarily practice heavy, because you don't get that much, right? So I do believe that our group, as in like our team, our squad of players, are like in the same mindset and have confidence within themselves. And these are all things that are like intangibles, but they're real. Like they're set how the games go. Like as much as I like stats and analytics, like just because we can't measure the power of being confident, the power of like wanting to get this extra trophy for Cristiano and for the nation, like those things are real, and those things will impact our performance, no doubt. But unfortunately, like in the friendlies, especially in the friendly against Egypt, we saw that. And it seems like I'm overrating a friendly, but like this Egypt team is like exactly the kind of tier of like Morocco and Iran, which is like not necessarily a powerhouse or a team that we can counter against, but it's a team that's like technically good enough to hurt us and smart enough to give us a lot of trouble by the way they defend. And our only solution with the ball is really to go for crosses and to play really, really wide, which is really weird when you're playing with William Carvalho, an extra center midfielder, and then João Mário, which is basically another center midfielder from the left, and Bernardo Silva, which is a guy that likes to cut in so much from the right. But we play such a very cross-heavy game for Cristiano, and our positioning is very questionable. Even the way that the team displays themselves with the ball and the way the team give each other passing lanes is very poor. And I'm of course hoping that will improve a lot within the next 2 months. But against bigger teams, if the experience at the Euro is to show of anything, is that we can defend well, or somewhat well, hopefully, even though our centre backs are old. I couldn't find another word, like a word above old, like somewhat.
Very experienced, that's the good way to say it.
Yeah, they are very experienced, but hopefully the team will be able to defend well enough to cope with those kinds of teams. And I remember Portugal doing really, really well, like against Croatia, against those types of teams, even if we didn't create much offensively. But there was a big dose of luck, right? And I don't want to be negative Nancy here, but the truth is, like, we won a trophy at the Euro, and I feel like with this pool of players, which is very, very talented in my eyes, except in one or two positions, the rest is we have a lot of options, a lot of talented options. We could do more, or we have the right to ask for more in terms of the way we play and the way we display ourselves and the way we like grab a hold of games. But at the same time, as soon as a manager wins a trophy with a team like Portugal, like he can do whatever he wants, basically.
Right.
This is not even criticizing him. It's like he also picks up a couple of players to the national team that probably I would have switched for others. But this is just my opinion, and I can't. At the end of the day, his argument back to me can be like, yeah, but we won like this, and therefore, and that's absolutely fine. Like I'm completely prepared to like fail this World Cup and then restart a new cycle and restart with new methods and stuff. And we won a trophy, and it was still very, very worth it. But
so it's almost like this World Cup is in sort of the grace period that Fernando Santos has for winning Euro 2016, like, and with this style and with this personnel, right? One thing I want to ask about is Cristiano Ronaldo's role, because he's 33, so this is probably the last World Cup where you could even make an argument that he's near the peak of his powers, right? Unless he has some incredible fitness regime and is there in 2022. So could you maybe describe, possibly in some detail, sort of Cristiano Ronaldo's role within this team, sort of tactically and stylistically?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, like in his latest years with Real Madrid, like he's been transferred, quote unquote, into a more and more central role where he doesn't see as much of the ball, and he's just there to create in the box and take a lot of central shots and to receive crosses and stuff of the sort. It's somewhat similar. I think he tends to do a little bit more with the ball. I think he tends to take responsibility a little bit more, and that's natural since he's the captain and it's the Portuguese national team and not the collection of star players that is Real Madrid. Even though our national team is good, like it's a different step. But he tends to maybe drift a little bit more away from the box, even if he starts there. But other than that, like it's his usual box role, and that's why we're sending in so many crosses constantly. And I have nothing against that.
So it's like
that in general. I just have against
they're aiming the crosses for Cristiano Ronaldo. Essentially, it's sort of let's aim for him, and maybe he'll get a header and goal.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's the idea behind it, but I feel like sometimes it's just mindless crosses, like as if we don't have any other way in when we have so many talented attacking players that could lead to a different type of game with the ball. But
so who are you thinking of? Like, what sort? Are you thinking of, say, Gonçalo Guedes? Is that someone who? Because I think of him as someone who's a bit more dribbly and would combine at the top of the box.
And even Bernardo Silva, that we know is so good. Like, he's legitimately a cracking player, and he would start for most teams in the world, and he often starts for City, even if he wasn't a sure starter this season. We absolutely must get him more involved, and we absolutely must get the best out of a couple of different players, and while also covering for the players that we know aren't that great, right? So, like, our centre backs, there's nothing we can do. Our player pool when it comes to centre backs is just very small. Like, we have Pep. You call him Pepe, because I'm sure you do, because every English speaker
but
does.
I should be calling him Pep. I did not know that.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we call it. Maybe we're the ones that are wrong.
That sounds unlikely. I
don't know.
I will call him Pep.
He was born in Brazil, so they might call him something different there, and you might need to talk to a Brazilian person for that. But but yeah, so Pep is, I don't know, like 34 now or something. He's 35 now.
Yeah.
He just turned 35 this season. But he's still very good. Like, he was one of the best players at the Euros, in my view. He's good even on the ball without being spectacular. He's solid. He's not going to be solid for too many more years, but we just need kind of a partner for him, and we don't have that much on our player pool. I don't even know who's going as centre backs, because in the last couple of friendlies, we had 2 injuries to 2 centre backs that could potentially get called, 3 injuries even to 3 potential centre backs that could get called up. And I feel like if they were, it would have given us a much better idea to what is Fernando Santos going to go with. But yeah, it seems likely that one of José Font or Bruno Alves can even start with Pep. And they're slow and they're old and they can't play a high line because they won't be able to cover for themselves, and that's fine, and we need to adapt to that for sure. But at the same time, in other positions, we have such an array of talent that we need to expect more from certain players, or from who's behind calling the shots, per se. You know?
So, in terms of the final squad, what are the big decisions that Fernando Santos has to make? Like, what are the big choices he has to make when he puts the final 23 names into FIFA?
Yeah, so I think that it's mostly in 2 or 3 positions. So the centre backs is definitely something to look at, because Pep is going almost for sure.
Yep.
Between Bruno Alves and José Font, one is playing at Rangers in Scotland when he's fit. The other just transferred to China after a horrific spell at West Ham. At least one of those 2 is going.
Right.
I'd say probably even both. In my eyes, I think we should take at least one. And then, so that leaves us with one extra option as a player, or 1 or 2, depending if they take all 3 oldies or just 2. And for that option, there's Ruben Neves, which is a young centre-back that just came through at Benfica this season and basically took up Lindelof's spot from last season. Mm-hmm. And he came from the B team, and he established himself as a starter. Unfortunately, he got an injury, exactly like I was telling you, he got an injury right in the last line of friendlies, so he couldn't get called up for his first cap. And I even thought Fernando Santos would even risk him, maybe even as a starter at the World Cup, like if he gave him caps already. But now I'm waiting for the next line of friendlies to see what he does, to see if he gets called up. But I think he's going to get called up just because he's playing in Portugal for a top team, and he's an assistant starter.
Could you remind me his name again? Because I feel like people may not be familiar.
Ruben Neves.
I see.
He's
DIAS.
Yeah, DIAS, exactly. So he he recently came through at Benfica. He's like, he's a sure starter since he came through, and he's probably going to continue being a starter from now onwards. But he's a solid centre back, like especially in the air and defensively. But he's not amazing on the ball or anything like that. So it still doesn't give us. It definitely brings us fresh blood, which is great, and a bit more livelihood to the position, but it doesn't bring us anyone that can do much different from a tactical standpoint.
But it does seem that if there are so many centre backs in their mid-30s that it's worth taking a younger guy to the World Cup, so you don't have the next tournament an entire centre back pool that has never been to a tournament. It would be
exactly, and we have a couple of others that are still probables to be called. Like I think if it's just for one spot, it's between Ruben Neves and Luis Neto. Neto was playing at Zenit last season. Now he's playing with Fenerbahce in Turkey. But he's not necessarily a regular starter. He plays quite a bit, and he's solid. But he's 29. Like it's not, and I think, and he also got injured in the last line of friendlies. I think that's why he wasn't called up. I'm sure you can see a pattern here. Not like it, but I think Fernando Santos connects well with him, and he was the one that was brought in as a fourth centre back or as a third centre back during the qualifiers. So I'm sure he's going to get a chance. There's a couple of others here and there that I would like to see being invited in because they don't have any caps, but I don't see it happening. Like Ruben Neves at Valencia, I think he's probably our second most talented centre-back in my eyes, but he's not anywhere close to the national team, but I think he would be able to deliver us a little bit of something different, especially on the ball.
How about
centre-backs?
How about farther forward? Because it seems like centre-backs there's not too many options. I would imagine the tougher choices.
And then it's too many options up top.
Yeah. So, for example, like is Ricardo Quaresma, who's a guy I enjoy watching, but I know he can be a little frustrating. Is he guaranteed to make the roster, or is he in a sort of a battle to make the final 23 with someone?
I think he's pretty much guaranteed. I don't think he'll start, but he's going to be taking it for his last World Cup. He's really, really close to the rest of the older members of the team. Like in the national team, he's never been, or not recently at all, he's never been like a problem from a group impact standpoint. Even on the contrary, like he deals great with the group, and he's very close to Cristiano, and he's still useful off the bench. Like we have more wingers, but I think Fernando Santos really appreciates his game, so he's pretty much guaranteed. I think there's a couple of midfielders that are that's where the question is. Yeah. There's maybe one striker spot that it's a little bit questionable since we over the last 2 years, like during the qualifiers, we really only brought in Andrés Silva to play up top, like as a proper quote unquote proper striker, like a number 9, and he's been doing well with Cristiano, but we don't really have many other options. And if push comes to shove, I think he might just play Quaresma or one of these like Guedes or something like that up top, or even play with a third midfielder and just one up top if something happens, because I don't see us taking another more classic striker that hasn't been close to the national team after the miracle. And I mean, that's fine. He hasn't played much where he plays, and all of our other strikers tend to play for minor teams that don't get much look at. In midfield is where we have a few more question marks from a talent standpoint. We have a lot of great midfielders and not space for all of them. We're not sure who's going to start yet as a more of a defensive midfielder. I'm sure you're going to ask me that just because of the season he's having, but I think Ruben Neves recently just got his spot almost guaranteed, which is lovely because I think I really like him. I think everyone really likes him.
So I don't know if you know this, but I'm a Wolves fan, so I'm obviously a big admirer.
You really are.
Of
I
Ruben
did not
Neves.
know that.
Yeah. But I'm kind of surprised to hear you say that his spot is almost guaranteed, because I would have assumed that just the fact he's playing in the second tier of English football would have made it a tough choice. Because I look at the rest of the Portuguese roster, I mean, everybody's in the top tier, right? So, and Neves is really the outlier in terms of the level that he's been playing at.
I mean, not for long.
For the past year. Yeah, that's true. But you could look at him and make the argument that he hasn't played. He's been playing below where he should be, and therefore to me it makes it risky to then take him to a World Cup. But maybe he's played for the national team and impressed in the meantime. I'm not sure what else has happened.
So that's partially why I say he's almost guaranteed. I would not have said this 6 months ago. I would have said that his spot is not guaranteed at all but guaranteed. If anything, he was fighting for a spot and he was distanced from it, not because of lack of talent, but because of we took 2 defensive midfielders to the Euro, and the same 2 were going to come in here, which is William Carvalho as a first option and Danilo from Porto as a second option that can also, in theory, fill in at centre-back, even though he's never done it for the national team. But in the last couple of months, Danilo had an injury, and due to Danilo's injury, Ruben was called up. He has been called up a couple of months ago, but in the last line of friendlies, Danilo was injured, so Ruben Neves came in with William Carvalho as the 2 defensive midfielder options. He got some caps, and then recently Danilo came back from injury, and then he got injured again. It's very bad, and he's not going to the World Cup. So Ruben Neves quickly went from third option to second option because the second option is just not available. But Ruben Neves did really well in the last couple of friendlies. And I think, firstly, he's in with a shout to play defensive midfielder. It's between him and William Carvalho. Both players with real technical defensive midfielders per se, and or passing style defensive midfielders than ball winners, which is what Danilo kind of offered different, which I like. I like having like one of each type, but since we don't have that, I think these 2 are quality, right? And there's the option of Ruben Neves possibly even starting alongside William Carvalho as more of an 8 per se.
So he would replace Adrian Silva. Yeah.
So Ruben Neves will be fighting for a spot either for the defensive midfielder and for the center midfielder spot, and that center midfielder spot is still up for grabs, both between the players that are going to be called for sure and between the couple of players that could be called. I really don't know who's going to take that center midfielder spot. Adrian Silva really does well besides William Carvalho because they have a really nice understanding. They were the partners at Sporting in midfield, and their characteristics really mash up well. Like they make up for each other really well. But Adrian, as you know, at Leicester since January, he hasn't gotten that much game time. Only recently has he had a little bit more game time. So that puts a little bit of a question mark over his capacity to start or not, even though I'm pretty sure he's going to go. And I'm pretty sure he might be first option just because he was the option at the Euro, so as long as he's fit. João Moutinho is usually the other option, but he recently got injured. And now there's questions if he's even going due to that injury. And I personally don't like to see João Moutinho with William Carvalho. I think they have too many conflicting characteristics in the sense of like they try to do the same thing a lot of the time.
I see.
And then there's stuff missing, which is why I say that Adrian makes up for it so well. But in the middle of this, Ruben Neves might get a shout. And, I mean, by that time, he might have transferred to Liverpool already.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. How about, I just want to go back farther forward again. I mentioned, I may pronounce this incorrectly as well. Geds is a guy, every time I've seen him, I'm really sort of excited to watch him because I feel like he does a lot of unpredictable things that are fun to watch. So
physically, he's insane.
So where does he fit into the team then? Because he can't. To me, he's not a replacement for the number 8 midfielder like the Silva or Moutinho midfielder, no. And he's not like a striker to play alongside Ronaldo, as I understand it. So does he have a good chance of going to the World Cup? And if so, where does he play?
Yeah, so he's one of those players that I think he's probably going. But he's going as a fringe backup option. I see. From the bench option type of deal.
Like a wild card if things are going wrong, you can throw him in.
I think he's. I gotta be honest with you. Like I didn't rate Gedge that highly when he was playing here, and he's out of all the players, he's probably the player that has surprised me the most in terms of development and that the level that he's playing at right now. I take the hit personally. Like, I just didn't rate him at all for what he did. Like, he's always shown to be insane. Like, from a physical standpoint, he's really strong. He's really quick. His resistance is amazing. He can press defenses all game long, right? But at Valencia now, he's showing this capacity to like dribble even in tight spaces and to just burst in wide areas, and even to like he's always had a very decent shot. He's always been great physically, but like everything else was kind of missing. And now he's showing those things, and I'm not sure if I was the one that didn't see it or if he had this tremendous development. But he looks great, and I mean, congrats to the guy for doing so. And he could theoretically, like, he could start from our left mid spot. Like if there's a spot for him in the 11, it would be that left midfielder spot, which is where he plays for Valencia. And I think he would be a great option to just kind of disrupt defenses, especially against Iran, against Morocco. He seems like it would be an ideal type of option that a bit in a different way, but a bit like Bernardo Silva on the other side, doesn't just focus on wide play, even though like he might be asked to. Like he could just give us a bit of another interior option while coming from wide, which would be lovely. But at the moment, João Mario seems like the starting player on that left midfield side, which I don't know. For João Mario, is a player that's a lot more passing heavy. He's not necessarily quick. He has a good touch. He's technically evolved, but like he's not necessarily quick nor strong. He's more for teams that do play in a more calm possession-based style, in my view. And we don't necessarily do that. I don't think he benefits us a lot from a counter-attacking standpoint. And against teams that play deeper and that make us have the ball, I think we don't give him enough of the ball, or he's stuck in wide areas too often. So for that, you might as well replace him with a guy that can make the most out of those situations. And Gedge could definitely be that player. He's definitely in the pool. Players like Bouma, who's doing well at Leipzig, I'm 90% sure that he's not going to the World Cup. He hasn't been called up in a long time, but he could definitely be there, and he could definitely be a disruptive wide player. I
remember him playing against the United States in the friendly in November. So does that mean he hasn't been called in since then? Yeah, that friendly was basically total rotation. I remember that friendly because Mackenzie debuted, Tyler Adams debuted, I think. Yeah. So. And we debuted a bunch of players, or a couple of players as well. So it was very much like second, third string type of friendlies with like one or two starters. So I don't think that under-23 international.
Yeah, almost. And I don't think that's much evidence to be based on right now. But yeah, I think Bruma could be worthy of a shout from a uniquely footballing standpoint, and arguably should be worthy of a shout. But again, like, I'm critical of certain things within the national team and how the national team plays, but at the same time, I'm very realistic about how these types of tournaments are like these micro environments where, like, you don't get, like, certain things tend to be a lot more important than they are in club seasons. And I talk like about the psychological impacts and all of those things, and that's a lot of how we won the Euro. Like, besides luck, which was a very real thing, like, the manager is great at dealing with the group, and he's great at just kind of rallying everyone together for a single objective, and was the guy that in May before the Euro started said he was going to win the Euro, and nobody believed him, right? And the guy looked crazy, and that's fine, but so like, I need to respect him on that sense, and that's why he's always going to take a group that he trusts in. And I'm sure he knows more about football than me, a lot more, and I'm sure he's not blind at certain players. and how they're performing. And Bruma has been doing really, really well in Germany. But like Quaresma maybe has had a less impressive season, but he's one of the leaders in the group, and he's a very, very important player within the national team, within the like how the morale feels and how the group feels. And
yeah, and as you said earlier, you said earlier that stuff is intangible, but also it really does exist and it really is important.
Yeah,
and if that's the way the tournament was won, then maybe you've got to trust Fernando Santos to do that same thing again.
Yeah, I think it's kind of trying to find a middle ground, right? I think we're not using certain things right when we should be. Like, we have a bunch of talented players. We can't be swinging crosses in for 90 minutes mindlessly as if we're any like rock bottom team or something, you know? Like, we need to do more. We need to have a bigger discretion with the ball. We need to, our positioning when we are on the ball, we need to be a lot better than we are right now. And certain players maybe deserve a shot in the national team, but at the same time, we need to give it up and understand that that we won the Euro playing a certain way and dealing with certain teams in a certain way. And I'm not necessarily worried if we go through. I'm just worried about how going through. How are we going through?
So the final question I have for you on the national team is, we mentioned Nani at the top of this interview, but you haven't mentioned him since. Has he retired from international football, or has he not been selected? What's going on there?
I mean, not officially. Not that I know of. He's just kind of disappeared now. I mean, he actually had a very decent Euro playing in a central position that he didn't like. That is very unlike what his career was, in a very like flashy, inconsistent winger career that ended up being absolutely good, but like maybe not spectacular. But like, he hasn't been called. I'm not sure if he has been called up since the Euros. He might have been called up for the initial qualifiers, but since I think he hasn't been called up in over a year, and he has basically, with all of these guys, all of these Geds and Bruma and all of these types of players popping up, it's very, very tough for him to keep up, especially when he has less than 500 minutes for Lazio. So that sure doesn't help.
I see.
But his last couple of seasons he's in clear decline, even though he's only 31. Mm-hmm. It's crazy that at 31, Nani is getting like 500 minutes a season, and Cristiano is banging goals every week. At like 30, I don't even know how old Cristiano is. Like 2 years
33?
older.
Yeah.
So I think Nani's just past it, and that's fine. But he definitely contributed for that Euro in a way that I maybe didn't expect him to. And so, I mean, that's great.
So, Tiago, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about Portugal with me. I really feel sort of better educated about the team. I can't let you go without asking about Wolves. Because as I told you earlier, I'm a Wolves fan. And obviously Wolves has a heavy Portuguese influence this year with the midfielder who I've now learned to pronounce his name as Ruben Neves. And George.
See, that's a solid 9 out of 10.
No, but I was just copying you, so it's
it's
easier to mimic, right? But Nuno is the coach, and obviously George Mendes is involved as an agent. And so I was wondering how much attention Wolves, or would they be pronounced Wolves in Portugal? How much attention they're getting over there?
I think so. I don't really change my pronunciation of English names when I'm speaking in Portuguese. But yeah, I think in theory that's what they'd be called. A weird thing.
So are people paying attention?
Somewhat. I think people are aware of what's happening. People are more or less aware of the players that are there, especially Ruben Neves. Mostly Ruben Neves because he was the big one, right? Because he was not necessarily last season, but before he was a starter for Porto. So people are aware that he's there. Football people in Portugal are obviously aware of the project and aware of every Portuguese player that's involved, from Ruben Neves to Helder, Ivan Carvalho, even Roderick. Bolly is there. He just got bought by Wolves. Bonatini was also from here. He's Brazilian, but he spent his best season was here, I think.
Helder Costa is a guy that has really impressed me when I've seen him as well.
I mean, last season he had more of a space to shine, right?
Yeah.
Remember that? Was it the cup game in Liverpool?
Yes.
Last season? Impressive. Yeah, he was just kind of one that got outshone this season, unfortunately for him, because of Diogo Jota as well. Jota is also pretty relatively big, almost in Ruben Neves levels. But yeah, I think people are aware of the project. No one really follows much of the club, especially because there's no championship coverage on TV, not even on the like football sports television type of deal. There is really no championship coverage, which is unfortunate. But I'm sure that people will follow next season even. In the
that's
Premier
interesting.
League.
Yeah, because I'm assuming that the Premier League is heavily televised and quite popular in Portugal. So
right?
If there's a team that's sort of heavily Portuguese represented, maybe that could be a following.
Games.
Yeah.
All the games are going to be shown on TV. I mean, people aren't gonna buy like Wolves scarves and shirts. Like that's not happening. Like people here are from one of the three big teams, and that's it. Like, it's just how it is. But for sure, like the Premier League is gonna get covered. It always gets coverage, and if a team has a particular Portuguese feel to it, like this season, like United was always shown. Swansea, since Carlos took over, has been shown as well constantly. So there's that factor for the team to be more televised, and therefore for people to follow it a little bit more and to be aware of it a little bit more. But I'm not sure what you're expecting from here, but I mean people are aware of it. That's it.
Yeah, so I wasn't looking for you to tell me they're the most popular team. I'm more just interested in. I'm just interested in how they're being perceived around the world, if that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, I think the Jorge Mendes connection, like everyone's aware of the Jorge Mendes connection, right?
Okay.
And everyone's aware of who he is, of what he does, and of people that are more or less into football, which is a lot of people here. Are aware of like his connection to certain clubs, so like his connection to Valencia and Atletico and Benfica and all those teams that he tends to swing players between, right?
Yeah, I saw a video that you tweeted out which showed the sort of pathways of players essentially bouncing around between the teams that he's involved in. Yeah,
I mean he's involved in a lot of teams, but those teams he has a lot of like power over, like Monaco as well. And I mean Wolves just kind of. I think because you already had connections there the season before this one, right? Or 2 seasons before. I don't know. Whenever Ivan Carvalho and Elder arrived, I think they arrived at the same time.
It was the start of last season. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people there saw it as just like, okay, another Jorge Mendes connected team. He's just gonna like quote unquote rip them off, make them pay like 15 million for players from like Benfica's academy or Porto's academy or whatever, and he's gonna let them rotate there, maybe make a profit in the future as well.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. And now this season, like the summer happened, and all of a sudden, Porto drop Nuno, and Nuno goes there, and people just kind of got shook up a little bit. Like, okay, like in the Championship, a guy that could have been coaching in the Champions League, even if he wasn't necessarily like adored by the Porto supporters, like it's not a common move, right? And then Ruben Neves goes, which is like probably the most talented player of his age in Portugal, and like he was already one of Porto's captains, and Porto had to sell him, right? Porto were in a little bit of financial trouble, and therefore had to sell him, or had to sell in general, and they chose to sell him. But it was very confusing, even to me, that like you wouldn't go elsewhere. Like I think, like if I was any top team, I would have played a bit extra to beat Wolves to it, you know?
Yeah.
Because he's just that good, and he was that good last season. Like he could have gone straight to Liverpool. I have no doubt about that. And he costed what, 20 million? Liverpool could have put like 25.
Yeah.
But the connection with the agent is clearly a strong thing. And by last summer, when so many changes happened, especially Ruben Neves and Nuno, and then Jota as well, like you just look at the team by the summer and they're like, okay, this is a project to like look at the Premier League and to see what they can do there, because this team is not even appropriate for the Championship anymore.
So
then
it feels to me that there was maybe a gamble last summer where they sort of said, okay, we're going to try spending a lot of money on Neves and on Nuno and on, some other guys, and we'll see if we can just make this Championship team into a Premier League team. And then it's almost as good as if Mendes was connected with a Premier League team. And I think maybe if things had gone badly this year, then it may have gone back to being what you originally imagined.
The project.
And then we just get the Benfica B, Porto B players coming in after that. So for me as a Wolves fan, I think it's very fortunate that it did work out this year, because now we get to see the advanced version of the project instead of the version that we initially imagined.
I think that's it, really. When people ask me, I think someone asked me yesterday, like, what is Jorge Mendes' objective with the Wolves project? And I was like, well, I don't know, because I think it will depend a lot on how they do in the Premier League. But like with this team, you have a solid team to stay in the league, right? And I like that certain deals, like the Ruben Neves deal was a mindless deal. Like, you were always going to make a profit.
Right.
I don't know if he costed 15 or 20 million.
I think it was 15 million pounds is what I remember.
Yeah, so that's like almost 20 million euros, right? That's like 18 or something. That's absolutely fine for a player of his quality that used to put up the performances he did here as a captain for Portugal. Like, it was a mindless deal, but like guys like Bolly and guys like Jota, who you guys started the season by having on loan, and then as soon as you saw that like you have first place basically guaranteed, or that you have promotion basically guaranteed, you bought them, right?
Yeah.
Like I think
Jota, the deal goes through in the summer. Bolly, I'm not sure if
Bolly just got bought this week.
Oh, really? Oh, that's wonderful. That's good news for me.
I think someone sent me a text saying Bolly got bought for 12 million or something this week. And like, that's very smart to me, because if it didn't work, I don't think you'd have that much... what's the opposite word of profit?
Loss.
Yeah, I don't know why I wrote there, but so I don't think you wouldn't have that much of a loss if you because you have a couple of your more expensive players were on loan, right, and the rest, even Cavaleiro was already there. Even Bonatini, I'm not sure if he came on loan, but he wasn't too expensive.
Yeah, so, he's on loan. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, like, then you bought them once you figured out that, okay, this team will be going to the Premier League, and we want these players in the Premier League, and they can handle the Premier League, and they can. Like, Jota and Ruben Neves were two players that could have gone to the Premier League last season, and a lot of people were saying that. They didn't, but now they're there. So, and I think Wolves have a young team, a solid team that can go, like, that can keep growing. I mean, I'm not even sure if you guys are going to keep Ruben Neves or not, but I think the project has seems solid enough to stabilize itself. I
should probably hope that Ruben Neves doesn't have that good of a World Cup.
I mean, yeah,
maybe he doesn't catch too many eyes this summer.
But the thing is, I'm not sure to what this seems kind of weird, but I'm not sure to what point can he be sold, because I feel like once he went to Wolves last season in the Championship, and I'm almost sure that he could have gone to a lot of other teams, maybe a Liverpool tier teams, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't. And now he's with Wolves in the Premier League. And he was going to change now. Are Wolves in need for cash? I don't know. I don't understand Wolves' finances well enough to be able to say if they need to make a sale or something. But if you're spending this much on players, you clearly should be fine, and you're going to receive the crazy TV money from the Premier League anyway. So except if he changes his how he feels about in the team, or how he feels about living in Wolverhampton. Understandable.
I think it's that one. I think not so much the living in Wolverhampton. I think it's the because you can live outside in a nice area and travel in. I think it's more the idea.
I've never been to Wolverhampton.
It's more the idea of, I think he. At some point, I assume he will want to play for a sort of Champions League team, right? So what I'm thinking is hopefully he just at least wants to spend 1 year playing for a non-Champions League team in the Premier League, and then maybe he gets more ambitious after that.
I don't know. He came out this week saying that he wants to stay, right? But I don't know if the Liverpool interested. The thing with Liverpool is that he could probably start there.
Yeah.
With all due respect to Henderson. Like I think Ruben Neves is like Liverpool's starter quality at the moment. Like everything into account the position that he plays in, right? So,
but maybe he has more chance of doing that if he spends a year looking very good in the Premier League for a different team. Then it's an easier move and an easier slotting into the starting position.
I think you should keep saying that, like, to a bigger and bigger audience every week.
I will try my best. Tiago, thank you so much. I really feel like I've learned a lot about the Portuguese team, and I've managed to get new insights onto Wolves as well. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I know I've had you on the phone for an hour or so now, so I really appreciate it.
No, it's fine. It's
right.
Great to talk to people that want to talk about interesting stuff and that let me talk.
Yeah,
I know that I don't mind answering questions. I know I talk a little bit too much, but yeah. Sorry if I talked over you.
I don't think there'll be any complaints. So if people want to sort of follow your work, what is the best way to follow what you're doing?
All right, so I think Twitter is probably the best way.
Okay.
And my handle is @Tiago ESTV, so TIAGO ESTV. I decided to kind of simplify my last name for the sake of everyone involved. And so you can follow me there and hit me up if you need anything. And that's it.
I'll put a link in the show notes so people can click it easily and find you as well.
Lovely.
All right. Well, thank you again, Tiago. And I'm going to say this to everybody I interview about their World Cup teams, but best of luck to Portugal at the World Cup.